welcome everybody. A few people joining us. I see coming in at the bottom, which is terrific. I hope the World of Learning Summit and this new virtual style that we're all using at the moment is working for everybody. I'm sure everybody's absolutely familiar completely with using Zoom, Teams, WebEx, and various others that are available. And of course, getting used to using it and being used to using these technologies is slightly different from being competent or mastering their capabilities. And so this next session with Joe Cook from Lightbulb Moment is designed to talk around how we get better at some of the virtual classroom stuff. Joe has lots of experience, and as you can imagine, as somebody who basically teaches people how to use the technology, which has become the absolute bedrock of what we're doing at the moment. She's been pretty busy over the course of the last few months. And so we're absolutely grateful, pleased as punch that she has been able to find time in her schedule to present this session. So she is the person to go to around virtual classrooms. She's done loads of this work, both around classrooms and webinars, the difference between. And at this point, I'm going to say, Joe, come on in. Thank you very much indeed for your input today. And remember, folks, Q&A box is open. So if you've got questions, we'll have some space at the end and I'll be monitoring those. And also add any comments you like to the chat. It also adds some value to the session overall. So without further ado, can I introduce you to Joe Cook? Thank you.
Oh, Robin, thank you so much. What a lovely introduction from you. And it's so good to be here at this event and to have all of you here in the chat window. So do please use that chat window. Just make sure you set the chat to all panelists and attendees, and then everyone can see it, not just me. As Robin said, at Lightbulb Moment, what I do is I train teams of people in how to use the technology like Zoom, Teams, Adobe Connect, WebEx, all of those things, but also in how to facilitate, just how do we do this live online thing. I've got a background of nearly 25 years in L&D, including further education, higher education, charity sector, really big companies, and now I run my own company. But I'm not alone. I also have with me today Michael. Michael is my business operations manager. He's also my producer on the sessions. And for our sins, he's also my brother, but we promise not to argue today. Paula is already asking a question in chat, which is brilliant. Which is the best platform? It depends a lot on what you want to do. We've got a podcast where we talk about platforms. I'd say Adobe Connect is my favorite for virtual classrooms. It's got loads it can do, but the best tool is the one you have. Zoom is really good. Teams has got some catching up to do, but if that's what you've got, you make the absolute most of it. Okay, so today I am focusing on the facilitation elements for you to consider to ensure interactivity and engagement, because we've all been on those webinars, on those virtual instructor-led training sessions, which are like this, when that's not what we want, when we want to help people to learn. And as designers and facilitators, we need to do more in our design, more in our delivery in virtual classrooms. And that's what we are going to explore. So today, in the next 40 minutes, what we're going to cover are the challenges that virtual classrooms present to us, because I don't want to sugarcoat it, there are challenges. Also, we're going to look at some key facilitation tips to help you out. And of course, we've got time for Q&A. As Robin said, there's the Q&A panel if you want to go and click on that at the bottom of the screen, or click on the chat at the bottom of your screen, change it to all panelists and attendees. And we would love to hear your questions and comments as we go through. And as I said, Mike is there to help out as well. So first of all, we always need to acknowledge those challenges we have with virtual classrooms. And virtual classrooms at Lightbulb Moment, we say it's up to about 10 people. You can have a large virtual classroom up to about 30 people. And you could, more than that, we call a webinar. And we are definitely in webinar territory today. So what I'd like to know, please, from you is what are some of the challenges you are seeing for the design or facilitation of virtual classrooms? So, a lot of us have been doing it this year. starting out, getting used to it. It's been a shock. Some of us have been doing this for a while. So do make sure you're set to all panelists and attendees so everyone can see what are some of the challenges you've experienced this year. Feedback, or probably lack of it, is what I'm assuming there, Robin. Yeah, lack of engagement, says Pete. Technology challenges, oh, they're so much of a struggle. Unprofessional conduct on webcams, creating opportunities for different types of interaction, people on devices that don't have the full functionality. A tablet or a mobile device doesn't always have everything that we want. Too much text on the slides. Hopefully you won't see a lot of that from me today. Matt says, are they still there? Yeah, if they're not on webcam, we don't know. And Lauren says, the silence when you deliver is so hard. And I really understand that. Even when interaction is designed, says Frank, the lack of audience willingness, oh, that's a challenge. It's all about starting out right from the beginning. The non-verbal communication, Chris, we will tackle a little bit about that. Being able to confirm engagement, says Clive. I've lost your video, says Jen. Yeah, I turned it off, actually. Let me turn it back on. It's no problem. I can turn it back on. Sometimes people like it on. Sometimes people find it distracting. So that's why I turned it off. So you can tell me what you want, everybody. Not knowing how familiar people are with the software, being able to fully participate when hearing impaired. Well, that's a very good reason for me to have my webcam on so that you can actually see what I'm saying as well. Okay, yeah, disabilities, engagement, when the Xbox goes on in the house, that, yeah, all sorts of different challenges that we have. And one of the key ones, or doing other work, I like that, Jane. One of the key things that we find and that you are sharing is a challenge when we're facilitating virtual classrooms, is that unless everyone has their webcam on the whole time, we can't see them. And we can feel like we're just talking at a computer screen, at that silence, which is kind of really challenging when we're used to a group of people and feeding off of that energy. And it can feel like we've got no energy to bounce off, we're not getting anything. Now, I'm here to tell you you can do it, but that is one of the challenges that we face. We've also highlighted our technology, whether it's people in the house playing Xbox and using up all the bandwidth, or Robin and I were chatting beforehand about those problems when your internet goes down and you don't have a backup. And you're right, Paula, it is more effort and energy because you do have to get that across, but it's worth it, I promise. And it can feel like a barrier, this technology thing, but I'd like to think of it as an enabler, because it enables us to do things similar as we might do face to face. And we all know something will go wrong at some point face to face. I bet you've all had the projector not work, the screen fall off, you know, all of those things. So it isn't new to us. Okay, now there's an issue that when a lot of people first start delivering virtual classrooms, they actually go back into a little bit of lecture mode, and not all of those great, wonderful, inclusive, enabling, engaging ways of delivering a session that we normally do. And I did that too. I absolutely did that too, because it can feel like there's so much to concentrate on. And at first we don't feel confident with all those basics. So we have to pare everything back down. And I think that the trouble is that this doesn't cause learning. You know, just telling people isn't learning. How many times have you said to your kids or maybe your partner, I did tell you? It's like, and lots of it, and I bet they still do the thing that annoyed you. So we know that telling isn't learning. Okay, and Jane says, when people do not talk back to you, this leads to instruction-based learning. You're absolutely, and it's a way of learning, but is it the best way? And is it the way that we want to do it live online? So let's have a look at some key facilitation tips that will help you with your virtual classrooms, I hope. So the first point is that any learning intervention should of course be based on performance needs of the business. It's really, really important. Let's not focus on the bad design of this slide. We're not going there. That's a whole other session. What's wrong with the goals on this slide? What's wrong with the goals on this slide? And Kaylee says that Teams has been difficult for the interaction. I mean, it's got some really nice little features, but it's not quite there in terms of like Zoom and Adobe Connect. So it's getting there though, some more investment. So do remember to make sure you're set to all panelists and attendees so everybody else can see, please. But you're absolutely right. They're not SMART, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, time-based, or a variation on that. They're not active verbs. There's a lack of application. They're not measurable. They're too vague. Yeah, I hate that word understand as well. It's like, I understand lots of things, but there's also a lot of things that I don't actually do. So there's a very different thing. Now, this is a very classic learning objective, that horrible understand word. And as you say, we can't measure it. We can't observe it. Liz says it's not appealing to learners. Yeah, you look at that and you're like, oh, yawn city. And the trouble is, this also kind of leads us down a path of, well, if you need to understand why we put documents in a management system, well, I'll tell you why we do that. Whereas if we make this much more active and much more about what you must do, then actually it's about, well, what you've got to do at work is store the documents. That's the actual thing you need to do. And this means that what we're more likely to do is say, well, let's load the document system. Let's have a document and see which buttons we press to do that. And part of that, of course, is explaining the why and having that discussion. This will not be a surprise to some of you, I'm sure. What I'm talking about here is part of a process called action mapping, developed by Kathy Moore. And let us know in the chat window if you've come across Kathy's work and you love it already, or if it's new to you. And Kathy's work and process looks at knowledge as the very last part of this training puzzle. And Bethany says, woohoo, Kathy Moore, absolutely. Because the knowledge is there to support the action, to support the learning, rather than leading us down this lecture path. And if you've not come across Kathy Moore and her work before, do not worry, we've got a handout for you, and it includes some resources and links so you can have a look at those later. At its most fundamental, I think that instructional design is about creating an environment where people can learn, where people can experience something, all about something that's important to the organization, to them themselves, their professional development, skills development, you know, whatever that kind of important stuff is to them. It's not about dumping content into PowerPoint, much as I like a good PowerPoint slide, and I think they can be used for good rather than evil. It's not just about e-learning modules or PDFs or your LMS or anything like that. You're focusing on how people learn, to help them learn better, to facilitate engaging activities and discussions so that they can be better back in the workplace, which is what largely people want to do. And that brings me to our next tip, which is all about using a range of the tools you have available to you. And we need to make sure we use that variety in the platform so people don't get fatigue, quite frankly, from doing the same thing over and over. We've all heard about Zoom fatigue, which is largely about going to lots of meetings. I think that's actually meeting fatigue. I'm not sure specifically it's about Zoom, but this is the kind of thing that we're talking about. So the important thing here is to learn your technology, whether it's Connect, Zoom, Teams, whatever it is. What can it do now? How can you use those tools in different ways? Are there apps you can use outside of the platform to make the experience even better? Somebody mentioned Mentimeter earlier on. There's WooClap, there's Padlet, there's Mural and Miro, and about a million other different things that you could go and have a look at. But you don't have to do all of this at once. You don't have to have every single tool in the toolbox that you use in the very first session or the very next session that you do. But it is about taking out a couple of tools, making sure you know how to use them really well, being creative with them and building things up as you go along and getting comfortable with them. There are so many ways that you can get people involved in your virtual classroom. Paula, is there a list? Yes, I do have a list. Let me go and grab it. It's not a definitive list, but it is a handy list if you've never come across these before. So I've just shared those in chat for you. So we can do all of these different things depending upon your platform and what you've got available to you, of course. Chat, hold and send is a fun one. It's not a button or an icon that you press. It's a lot about you ask a question, you ask people to type in chat, and the hold bit is don't send anything. Then what you do is you get everybody to give you a green tick or a thumbs up, whatever your platform is. And when everybody in your virtual classroom has done that, then you all hit send at the same time. Now, this is really great because in Teams, for example, there's no polling feature, so you could use it for that. It's really nice as well, just to make sure that nobody is influenced by other people's answers and you get people's own language, whereas a poll or using stamp tools on a slide is more about me telling you what I think. So the point here is there's loads of different ways you can get people involved. And yes, you can use forms, Tracy says, in Teams meeting for polls. Now, it's not quite the same as a Zoom poll, but you definitely can use forms. That's a really good one. And you can use that with quizzes and stuff as well, which is good. Please do share some more. I think somebody, Jonathan has shared idea boards. I haven't looked at that one yet, but I've heard it's good. So please do share some more in chat. And Slido says, Andrew, hello, Andrew. So it's really great to get some of that sharing going as well. So please do share some of that you like. Now, these activities that we're doing, these interactions and engagements, well, they need to be meaningful, because if you're just asking for green tick after green tick after green tick, it's going to get boring. And we can't facilitate learning properly if we're not getting really good quality feedback. And there's something that can help with this, which is a design point in the virtual classroom. Because underlying newer ways of working, communicating, learning with webinars, virtual classrooms, forums, social media, all of these things is digital body language. And you can give it different names: non-verbal communication online, body language in the bandwidth. The point here is this is something that was come up with by Steve Woods back in 2009. And what he focused on was the aggregate of digital activity. So it's about everything digital that someone's doing, but the key here is it's about the individual. It's not about Google Analytics across your whole website. It's about what did one person click? What was their journey through your website? And what does that tell you from a marketing perspective? We can apply this digital body language concept to the virtual classroom, because it takes the idea of these people that are just names. I've got, what, 160 of names that are just a list on my screen right now, and it humanizes you. It turns you back into actual people, which is what we really like working with. When I'm running my virtual classrooms with, say, 10 people, and I focus on what they want to type in chat a lot so I can get to know them. And because this is about what people want to share, it's what they want to type all the time. And by using people's names, it makes it personal and it pricks up people's ears. And it's so easy to do live online because the names are right there. Also, this is a way of seeing people. So there's chat going on. People are sharing things. So Stuart shared about quick pulls in Teams meeting chat. That's a latest update. I'm going to investigate that, Stuart. Thank you very much. And it's really nice to be able to reference people specifically and have that little bit of interaction, even in a webinar like today, and make that more valuable to people. The way to think about this digital body language is to deconstruct what we normally do face-to-face and rebuild it in our virtual environment. So face-to-face, what do I do as an instructor or teacher or trainer? Well, what I'm largely doing is looking around the room. Who's got this concept? Who's looking frazzled, or who needs some help, or whatever it might be? Now, live online without webcams, I can't do that. So what I might start with instead is a closed question, which we're kind of usually taught isn't a good thing. But if I say green tick if this and red X if that, or smiley face or thumbs up, whatever, It starts the conversation. And from there, I could say, well, if you put a green tick, could you tell me in chat why or how? And if you put a red X, Bob, let's get you unmuted. Tell us a bit more about, whatever the question is. What we're doing is building this up. And it's about understanding what my craft is face to face in order to take all those tiny nuances where I, for instance, look around the room and interpret people's physical response and use tools in my virtual classroom in order to rebuild that and give me those opportunities to get that with you. So this learning feedback and this energy from the group, we know we need to interact with people. And what you can see on screen is just a whole variety of different ways of doing this, depending on your platforms. And all of this is about helping me to see people that I can't see, to be with people that I'm not with. And everything that people type in chat or green tick or put on a whiteboard, that's their digital body language that I can start interpreting and building an idea up in my mind of how I can tailor my learning to people and help the individuals and the groups. Now, this brings me on to point 4, which is planning group interactions every 2 to 3 minutes. And this might be different to advice that you've seen about interaction every 3 to 5 minutes. And I'll come back to this shortly. Now, this point was really reinforced to me by my friend and live online facilitator, Cassie Labori. The point of a virtual classroom is that it's live online learning. We're together here with a handful of people in a virtual classroom. So instead of me presenting at attendees, well, what could they be doing? What could the group be discussing maybe? What could they be collaborating on in breakout rooms? This is our learner focus. This is where we are there to facilitate that learning experience. Let's explore just why this is so important. So for you as an attendee, you could think about it on this webinar today, but also in a virtual classroom with less people. Why is interaction so important to you? So in chat, please make sure you set to all panelists and attendees. Why is interaction so important to you? It involves us. We're valued. We're engaged. I'm a human, says Frank. Lovely. It stops boredom. It makes it personal. I'm contributed and valued, says Lauren. We're sharing knowledge. Thank you, Lorraine. It captures various contexts, says Chris. Stops me zoning out. Saves a big energy. I'm not quite sure what you mean there, Phil, but I think what I'm getting is it's all about generating that energy. I'm getting that right now from all of your responses. Matt says, I don't know everything exactly. It's about facilitating and being involved in the conversation. Oh, a bit of energy, says Phil. I wasn't quite sure, but you're right. A bit of energy is there. We miss people, says Paula, absolutely. And this is about what can we do? It's not the same as being together, but what can we do that's almost as good? What can we do that makes this the best it can possibly be? And in some cases, the better option than a face-to-face session. And Tracy says it stops you thinking that you're talking to yourself. Really important. I like talking, but not to myself all the time. For attendees, this is so important as part of our learning experience. We need to think, it goes back to that. You can't just tell me, I need to think about it and process it myself. And that social discussion that you've highlighted is so important because you're learning from each other as well as hopefully a little bit from me as well. So what about from the facilitator point of view? So from my point of view right now, and from your point of view when you're delivering your training, why do you want this interaction? What's so important about you getting this? Paula, yeah, it's about doing as best you can in this environment. And I think this environment can be pretty darn good. Not everybody's quite along that same journey with me, but it is about applying all good learning theory in this way. So why do we as facilitators want this feedback? Yes, where are they? Have they learned? Have they understood? Are we on track? It takes away some of the heavy lifting from me. We check their understanding. We're making sure as best we can that people are learning. Do we need to go faster or slower? Maybe I'd rushed through something and I've missed something. It's a sense check. It gives me energy, says Lauren. Yes, absolutely. I recorded a video for a conference that I couldn't attend recently, and I did my best and I got good feedback, but it wasn't the same without having you all there telling me these things. Vart says it's collaborative. Yes, Hussein says you keep a bond with learners. Absolutely. And it adds content to the session. Yeah, in a good way. It adds extra energy and richness to what's going on. Kimberly says we adapt as we go based on the feedback. And all of this stuff is really important. Christine says it's hard to decide where to focus, on the constant chat role or the presenter. And that can be a challenge in a virtual classroom. No, it can't. Well, it can. It can be a challenge in a webinar is what I meant to say. And especially because, you know, I can't attend to every single thing that you're writing. So it's really important that we can kind of summarize and get involved where possible. And you as a learner decide where you want to concentrate as well. Okay, so as facilitators, the basics of knowing that people are actually still at their computer can be really helpful. Actually, knowing that they're paying attention and responding to things can help. You're right, it's about tailoring to the individual and the group and getting to know people and reading that digital body language and responding to them. And making it more natural, making it more normal, I think is important. Now, a lot of books or blogs that you might have read will tell you that you should have interaction every 3 to 5 minutes. Now, an interaction is something relatively quick and simple. It could be green tick if you agree, or a word in chat, or a stamp tool on the whiteboard. It's usually something relatively quick. An activity is usually 3 or 4 of those things all built together to build up into an activity, a discussion, whatever it might be. So in other words, if you've been talking for 5 minutes, you need to stop and involve your audience. That's what this rule is telling you. And it's a really great place to start and remember all of those different tools. And Lorraine says use of breakout rooms. That's definitely one of them. The breakout room, Lorraine, I'd say it's probably part of an activity. The interaction in terms of every 3 to 5 minutes, I would say is more like in chat type this, or you might be kind of referencing something else that I haven't seen in the chat. But either way, hopefully that's kind of useful. Now, this is all really great, but for my virtual classroom training courses, I average about every 2.5 to 3 minutes. And actually, we had a client recently that was timing me, it turned out, and I managed about every 3 minutes for an interaction. Remember, it could just be green tick if this, or as Liz says, a GIF can be good fun, or an emoji in chat. Now, initially, some people will find this concept way too much. And it's like, what? Joe, you're asking a question like every 3 minutes? You're making me do something every 3 minutes? Or as a facilitator, I have to plan something every 3 minutes. This is overload. It is too much. And I totally get that. It can feel that way. What we're doing though, if we think back to deconstructing what we do face to face, we wouldn't go more than 10 seconds probably without looking around the room, without judging the energy, looking at people's facial expressions, reading the body language, seeing what people are doing. So what we're doing with this every 2 to 3 minutes idea is trying to reconstruct that experience that we have. So if every 2 or 3 minutes I'm saying, well, green tick if this, or in chat that, or hand up if such and such, I'm giving you all these opportunities to give me information to tailor to your learning. I'm doing the same as I do face to face, but I'm reading the digital body language instead. Paula's asking about some timing of sessions, so please do let Paula know what you think. And Paula, we've got a blog on some timing and stuff that I'm sure Mike will go and drop into the chat as well for you. Now, what's interesting on our training sessions and courses that we run is the people that at the beginning said, oh, no, you can't possibly have an interaction every 5 minutes. We would never get through our content. To a few sessions in, when maybe one of their colleagues is delivering a 10-minute teach back, will say, well, you only interacted with me twice. You only asked me for a green tick and a red X or something. And they're the ones that suddenly are saying we don't have enough interaction. So it's a really interesting journey. All this takes time. And it does. It takes a lot of time in your sessions. Now, when you're designing any webinar or virtual classroom or any session, we need to plan those interactions. And it's putting those interactions together to be a big activity. And this is where it's important to focus on the live aspect of the session. Because if you're just delivering content at people, well, that could be a video or a PDF or an e-learning thing. The live session is where you do stuff together. So my last tip is about using a modern learning facilitator guide. Really important, I think. Now, this is my one, and I just want to talk you through a few things in here about how I approach this. It might not be right for you. This is a template. You will be able to download it. We've got it in the handout for you, so you can go and find out some more information later on. So what I've got on the very left here is slide images to help me where I am. A lot of you will know about dual coding and that kind of stuff that we can't talk and read at the same time, basically. And this image really helps me out to visually, quickly, easily know where things are. Paula, the handout will be in chat, available a little bit later. I think Tracy or someone might be doing that, or I can do it later. Then we've got the facilitator column. I don't script out everything. I've got enough notes to help me or someone else who might be covering me. But what I do have are the questions in red. They're the bits that I've spent time planning and want to do. So I want those to jump out at me. In the producer column, this is things like where Mike's working today, some things he's got planned to share and chat with you, other things he's doing live. And you might be thinking, well, that's great, Joe, if you've got a Michael with you, woohoo for you. But if you're on your own, it's still useful. Not every session I run is with Michael, sadly. He's great there, and I miss him when he's not there. Don't tell him, he'll get a big head. But it's really useful because it separates out what I need to put in chat, or what pod or PowerPoint or screen I need to share, or whatever it might be. So it separates out facilitation and technology. Also then we've got the tech stuff. So this example is actually for Adobe Connect for changing layouts. If you're a WebEx, it could be changing tabs. If you're Zoom, it would be which PowerPoint do you want to share? And I use icons again here for things like the activities. Is this in chat? Is this hand up and unmute? It means I don't have to script it so much. And from a design point of view, what I can really easily see as well is, have I got a variety of activities in here? And have I got something every 3 to 5 minutes? Because what I'm doing is I've got my time here as well. And you might be thinking 30 seconds, God, Joe, why are you doing that to yourself? But again, it's like, this is a quick slide, move on to the next thing. Or this is a bit more of a conversation. And at the end of each page, I have where I plan to be. And Mike, as my producer, will absolutely tell you, I am very rarely on time. And quite now, I'm looking at the time now, I think I'm about a minute behind, something like that. Because it's not important to be exactly on time. It's important to know where you are so you can flex in the moment for what people need. But if I was 10 minutes behind at this point, I'd be panicking. So it's really important to know these things. So from this, you might take away a couple of ideas and think, yep, this looks pretty good. This is something that I want to do. Or you might be thinking, actually, no, that's not my cup of tea. What I'm doing is pretty good, whatever. It's there for you to have a think about if you want to. Somebody asked, do I use this for my face-to-face sessions? Yes, I do. I didn't used to do it in this kind of detail, although on my blog, lightbulbmoment.info, you can go and find a blog where I've got the history of all my facilitator guides, which sounds boring, but actually it's quite interesting, I think. So I do use this for face-to-face, and it's built up out of those face-to-face ones. So I actually use this for all of my sessions now. Okay, so let me come to a summary, and then we're going to go into some questions in just a moment. So hopefully there's been a load here that's been useful for you to think about, is making you sure you follow something like Kathy Moore's advice and ensuring that your learning intervention is based on business needs and organization needs and the actions that people need to do at work. Really, really important. In your sessions, you use a variety of tools of whatever you've got available, and that could be inside your platform or externally. We talked about Mentimeter and Slido and loads of different ones. You need to get an understanding of how you can craft your face-to-face skills that you've got, all that greatness and what makes you the amazing facilitator you are. And how can you transfer that live online? What can you do with digital body language, where you'd normally look around, where you'd normally kind of judge, has this landed? Do you ask a question at that point? Do you do something there? Ensure that your interactions for your virtual classroom are every few minutes in order to go with that digital body language. If you don't ask, they can't give that back to you. And lastly, make sure that your session plan, your facilitator guide, has enough in it from the tech point of view, from the live online point of view, to help you run your sessions in the way that you want to. So I'm going to say thank you so much for your time and attention. We've got loads of time, well, loads, 5 minutes for questions. So Robin, what have I missed? What questions are there?
Well, there's a great point actually, and thanks for that session, Joe. Absolutely fascinating, and I think just a comment from me before we get into the questions, which is around the energy. One of the things that I say to people who are running virtual sessions, maybe for the first time, maybe for the first time since they've done face-to-face sessions, but they've not done it online before, is to say, listen to radio phone-ins. The energy which radio phone-in hosts bring to the conversation is the kind of energy that you need to give. So they're assuming there that you can't see them by definition. And therefore, there's a lot more energy in the voice. They're a lot more animated in the way they speak. And I think that's important within this kind of session. So a great example of that. Lauren Richardson came in with a point really about facilitating the group togetherness outside of the virtual classroom. So obviously when you're in a classroom together as a face-to-face event, you go off to a coffee together, you have lunch together, you have a chat around the edges during breaks, etc. But that's missing within a virtual session, particularly if it's going over a longer period, say of an hour and a half, 2 hours, whatever the session is. How do you do that? And do you use any activities before and between sessions which would enable people to still discuss and comment asynchronously and then bring it together within those sessions?
Absolutely. All depends on where people are, what's the course, is it a one-off session, is it internal, is it a group? So we do a variety of things depending on that. We've got a free community for everyone, lightbulbmoment.community, but part of that is we can set up private groups. So sometimes we'll have our teams of people that we're training have a private group, and we post resources and questions and get people to answer, kind of forum style, kind of MOOC style. You could build something like a MOOC, a massive online open course, or a mini MOOC, or whatever word you want to call that, whereby you are putting all of those materials out there and your live sessions are more about the questions and answers. So that'd be much more of that flipped classroom approach. It could be, we've got one client, for instance, that has a community of practice internally. And I'm not involved in that directly because of security and access issues, but I've given them suggestions for their community of practice discussions. And then I get a summary of that. We always have time before the sessions. People log in. We recommend sort of 10 or 15 minutes early. We have a bit of chit chat there. So there's lots of different ways you can expand this out from just that virtual classroom. So that's a really great question, Robin. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think that idea of using the flipped classroom approach is really interesting, and I've seen a couple of references to that recently, and I think its time maybe has come. So for those of you not familiar with flipped classroom, Google it. There's loads of resources out there, originally developed by MIT. And they came up with the idea where all the lectures and things like that will be put online, and the only interaction between students and faculty was going to be via discussion groups, seminars, activities. And to a certain extent, I've seen the move towards that using live online learning, particularly within the virtual classroom of, up to 10 people being involved primarily in a discussion session rather than a delivery session. Are you seeing more of that? Is that something which is happening a lot?
Oh, I'd love to say I'm seeing more of that, but I'm not sure I am. And what I'm seeing more of is people taking their face-to-face content-heavy lecture present session and then just doing that live online. And what we are doing a lot of work around is trying to say, well, if even you don't have to do the flipped classroom approach, but take out a third or a half of your content and make that resources of some description that's appropriate, and have time in the session to discuss, because that stuff around even interact every 5 minutes, so much pushback we get is, but I would never get through my content. And it's like, well, then you're just pushing content, and that's not the same as a learning experience or facilitating learning. So that's kind of where we're trying to help a lot of people.
And there was a comment on the platform from Frank McGoldrick on exactly that point, which is that he's under pressure from clients to say, but we've got to get through all of this content. This is the only game in town. We've got to make sure that within this 90-minute window or whatever it is, that everybody gets this. How do you push back to clients who are wanting you to overload those sessions?
Yeah, really good question. And sometimes it's always about being in their conversation and starting where they are, understanding it, unpicking it, using things like Kathy Moore's approach or performance consulting to understand what's driving that, and challenging in an appropriate way to try and get somehow to what's the important bit people need to do, and let's focus there. But that can be challenging if it's compliance, if it's they need a tick in a box, but it's finding that right way forward. There's probably more that I would love to say, but I'm really aware of the time. But definitely it's understand and ask questions first. Don't just challenge blindly.
Sorry, just remembering to switch off mute there. Yeah, and one of the things that I've been saying for a while now, I think, is that the purpose of our role is to enable people to do things differently and do different things. And if we're not focused on the doing, if we're not focused on action, then we tend to get into the idea of it being primarily about transmission of knowledge. Yeah. And very often, you're absolutely right, there are other ways of giving people access to information. And these days, one of the things that we're seeing more of, I hope, is the capability of everybody to create video, because you set up your Zoom call and you click record, or your Teams call and you click record. And actually, because people are more used to using these online tools as a result of the circumstances we find ourselves in, that quality is acceptable. So some options there in terms of making things available to people. We have hit the witching hour of 20 to 1.
Robin, thank you so much. And thank you everybody for your lovely comments in chat too. If we didn't get to your question, just tweet me, go to lightbulbmoment.community. We'd love to answer your questions.